we're not really selling a painkiller product. So it's kind of a nice to have unless you're a large business and you're regulatory obliged to report on your carbon footprint and things. The biggest challenges for us, in a nutshell, it's not far enough up the priority list. And how do we get it there? As a supplier of sustainability solutions, to be honest, I think you're a bit daft if your main play is a moral one, particularly in the B2B space. If you're going to other businesses and saying you should be doing the right thing, it's a very polarizing approach to take. Speed beats quality. Initially, I thought, really, does it? But your ability to do things fast, get them out the door and learn, rather than building perfection, that skill is an essential ingredient for growing a business pointing towards your customers. Your ability to then iterate and refine that at a phenomenal pace means you'll get a much better product quicker out to the market.
Hi Ian, thank you very much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
I can, Chris, and thank you for having me. Delighted to be here. So I'm the CEO and founder of Switch2Zero. We're a company focused in the sustainability space. Our mission is to accelerate the global transition to net zero. Quite a big mission, quite a challenging mission. We do that by helping businesses and individuals understand, calculate, reduce, and if they wish to, offset their footprint over a period of time. To give you an idea in terms of size and that sort of stuff, we were formed in November 21. We released our first product to market about 12 months after that. We have about 1,500 members on our platform. 78% of those are B2B, so they're businesses, which is where we target, and they are spread across 11 countries, primarily in North America, at the UK, but also other countries across Europe. We don't actively market to anyone outside the UK and North America at this point, but we pick up a fair bit of other business because we're out there and we're doing stuff. So that's a bit about Switch2Zero and what we do. For me, it's a very personal business. So my background is in banking. I had 28 years in financial services, working for some of the biggest banks in the world. I was in a really privileged position, leading some fabulously talented teams, focused on digital transformation, building digital businesses out globally and all that sort of stuff. I decided to take some time out, have a career break to spend some time with the kids, spent lots of time with the kids, feeling increasingly guilty about the dreadful state we're leaving the planet in for future generations. And it was as simple as that. I got to the point of thinking, right, are you going to feel guilty or are you going to actually do something about this? So rather than going back into financial services, which was the plan, I kind of put my money where my mouth is and set up Switch2Zero.
I guess my first question for you is, what have been the biggest challenges in getting businesses to engage with you and start working with you?
I'd start off by saying there are hundreds. If it was easy, obviously everyone would be doing it. So the overarching thing I would say is getting out there and experimenting and learning from it and trying something different is the only way. I think copying what we've done isn't necessarily the silver bullet to being successful, because something different might work for your business. Having said that, the three kind of biggest challenges I think we've faced, the first is we're not really selling a painkiller product. So it's kind of a nice to have unless you're a large business and you're regulatory obliged to report on your carbon footprint and things. And so as a result of that, there's kind of three things that are regularly raised by businesses. One is just the sheer volume of priorities. Is this important enough for me to do now? If I don't do it now, am I going to get beaten up for it, or will it hit my business in a difficult way? And the answer to that, they feel, is likely to be a no, and therefore it can go down the pile of priority. The second is there's a perception it can be expensive. So is all this green stuff and being more sustainable, does that mean solar panels on my roof or lots of other things I need to shell out lots of money for? And the third is really that underlying pressure point that I mentioned at the beginning. But it's also, if I'm being completely candid, businesses aren't feeling it that much from their clients or customers either. So albeit there's lots of stats out there that say there are consumer preferences, 68% more likely to purchase sustainable products, et cetera, that's not vocalized in a very obvious way to businesses. I believe it's true, but they don't know who they're losing because the customers don't turn around and say, I didn't buy your product because of X. It's more tangible in a business environment because obviously procurement are increasingly rolling in sustainability sections to their pitch documents and all that sort of stuff. But I suppose the biggest challenges for us, in a nutshell, would be articulated as in it's not far enough up the priority list. And how do we get it there?
Yeah, you're not the first person to say that, for sure. Selling sustainability is difficult because on the one hand, if you're trying to get people to engage with it, it's really hard to do it from a place of, I guess, guilt. And when it comes to businesses themselves, if the legislation isn't there, if the compliance isn't there, and if customers aren't asking them for it, then they have no real drive to do so. It's an interesting one with surveys. You can answer surveys however you'd like to. I feel like there's always an element of you want to put your best self forward in surveys, but living your day-to-day life, you're not probably going to answer it in the same way.
Yeah. What do you do when no one's looking?
Yeah,
absolutely right. But I think equally, as a supplier of sustainability solutions, to be honest, I think you're a bit daft if your main play is a moral one. If you're particularly in the B2B space, if you're going to other businesses and saying you should be doing the right thing, it's a very polarizing approach to take. And so what we certainly quickly learned, we didn't even start off in that space, but where we dial up our communication and the style of it is very much about doing this stuff will make a difference to your top line and your bottom line. And here's how. And here are some examples. Here are some testimonials. Here are some case studies. Because this has to be a commercial decision. And I suppose my background in banking as a numbers guy, it's about how clearly can you articulate that you can either save them money, help them make more money. And that's ultimately what you're trying to do, with the fantastic almost side impact being you're doing some great things for the planet at the same time.
Yeah, it's something I've spoken about quite a bit before is it doesn't matter whether your product is sustainable if it's equal in every other way to another product. No business is going to switch to it for that reason. Your product has to be better than what they're currently using and is also sustainable. And I think that's how the best companies in the space are going to grow in the next couple of years. But
yeah, and I think ultimately you've got to chase down the mantra that if being more sustainable ultimately means consuming things more efficiently, okay, there's recycling, there's doing other things, but whether it's power consumption, whether it's natural resources consumption, whether it's getting products from A to B and consumption of energy to do that, being more sustainable means you're using less energy to do things. And if you're consuming less and using less energy, you should be paying less. It should cost you less. Now, clearly, that's not accurate with everything that you do. But ultimately, what you've got to be chasing down as a business is how do I maximize efficiency of my operation, not just this week, but build towards a future that I can see coming. And then when you layer on the top line impacts, if you communicate that in a powerful way to your stakeholders, that's where you start to get this magnifying impact that can really help drive the business forward.
We've talked about the challenges that you've had then. What have been some of the most successful ways you've used to get new clients?
So new clients, we tried a number of things. By far the most impactful for us is kind of the old school way, if I'm honest. So we combine outbound telesales prospecting with email sequencing, particularly in consultancy. Now, clearly that's an expensive way of doing it. So you need a more higher margin piece of your business to focus that sort of approach. But having conversations with customers, but the outbound telesales is about getting commitment for a demo, not buying consulting. All you're asking those individuals for is 15 minutes of their time to understand more about their business so you can articulate how you can help fast. And that's quite a powerful, impactful way of doing it. So for us, particularly in the consulting space, that's been very helpful. Outbound email been in a more automated way, as in we're not trying to get demos, we're not phoning out off the back of it for other products that we sell, has also been pretty successful. But what you've got to marry and tie that to for it to be successful is what's the value return and how fast is it? What we have to demonstrate in the first 20 seconds or the first 2 lines of an email is really how easy is it? And easy for me is an equation of effort and reward. So what do I have to put in? What do I get out? And if we can make that very clear, very fast, then people quite quickly get into a kind of makes sense. It's worth a go. And effectively what you're doing then is creating a nice, easy on-ramp. And then you can introduce more complexity, as in more complex products or start to surface more complex needs as their understanding and their appetite increases as they get more familiar with this space.
One of the things you mentioned there was the effort. A lot of people talk about return on investment, but they forget about return on effort. And there's so much there that if you're selling into sustainability officer and they can take the ROI to their executive team, but if there are other projects that are more important, or the cost opportunity of taking this on as opposed to another projects they're doing really matters. And that's something that a lot of sales teams tend to forget.
So using that as an example, I think it's a great sort of case study in a way. So we obviously speak to sustainability officers, and to make it a little more tangible, you can very quickly get to a point where you understand what element is sort of burning platform for them. Where are they getting pressure? What are they finding difficult? And really what we're looking to do in that interaction is, what can I give you that's going to make you look like a rock star and help you get momentum going in the challenges that you face? And so part of the things we do are around helping them communicate what they're trying to do to their management teams, to their colleagues, in a way that is low effort for them and high impact. So the platform allows you to press a button and print off a very pretty sort of impactful looking report about what your carbon interactions are, various other things. And it they look at that sort of thing and then they'll say, well, how much is this going to cost me? And the price point is so low, it's almost a no-brainer for them. Now that's the quick, easy on-ramp. Then there's obviously more sophisticated needs that they have, which is where there's higher margin plays with consulting and other things that you may do.
What do you feel like is your biggest bottleneck or constraint at the moment?
It's human resource, really. I'm constantly managing a burn rate, and I am keeping that burn rate as aggressively low as I possibly can. And that impacts two primary areas. One is the talent you have in the organization and how much of it you have, and therefore the expectation of what a day's work is like for the people that work with you. Now, in fairness, if your productivity of individuals, you can ramp up massively if you're giving them the right tools and the clarity of what's important and why it's important, and then clear prioritization, in other words. But the other side of things we've done is switch off all marketing spend. So I say that, obviously we're doing outbound, we have some data lists, but we do no paid advertising whatsoever. And that is a massive soak for a lot of businesses that have the mentality of, I've built this really sexy product, people just need to hear about it. I'm going to drive out through socials and Google ads to sell everybody, and they'll just click buy. And the reality is they never do that.
Yeah, that was very much the sort of playbook that people were doing when we still had 0% interest rates. And you could put loads of adverts on a credit card and build from there. And then once you've reached a certain level of profitability or revenue, then you cut costs to get profitable. That doesn't work anymore. I think ads are useful for retargeting and they're useful for specific use cases. But I think just putting one out there and hoovering everything up just doesn't work anymore. You're right.
Yeah, it's got to be very, very high margin, I think, as a product line that you're focusing on to warrant it. So we are going to actually from next month do a little bit on Google, which is the first time since we stopped it mid last year. That's largely because we can carry the return on investment because of the margin of what we're selling. But equally, if I'm honest, I am far from convinced it's going to work. And I'm very skeptical. And it's almost a bet between me and Jen, who runs our marketing, who is far, far better than me at this stuff, to see how it pans out. But she's pretty convinced that because of the nuance associated in his footprint consulting, which is what we'll be doing, I'm still very much jury's out as to, am I just throwing money down the drain? It's not going to make a difference, but we'll see.
Speaking on the marketing side of things, then, we have to teach companies all these different terms in sustainability, all these different complexities. Obviously, you have the consultancy side of things, but how is it you work with your clients, or even when they're before their clients, educate them and help guide them to make the best actions possible?
So on the platform, we have a free to access resource center. So you can go in and read, top 10 tips on this, that, what does this mean, a terminology sheet, lots and lots of content that you can search, and it's, categorized and that sort of stuff. That's free to access whether you're with us or not. What we then do in our dealings with either proactively to try and win new customers or with existing customers is we don't show them the whole iceberg. We're very, very pragmatic about sustainability. We show them a quick win. We show them an easy way to start to create some momentum. They don't need to know about everything else. And it's only really when they start asking those questions that they're signaling to you that they are ready for the next evolution of it. A perfect example of that is if you were to go onto our platform as a business, you can join for free. You can read lots of articles and all that sort of stuff, whether you joined us or not. But let's say you join, then you're taken through to a dashboard that clearly, if you haven't done a lot, doesn't have a lot on it. The classic start point, if you're trying to help businesses reduce their carbon footprint, is to calculate their carbon footprint. There's a lot of logic to that. But it's also a bit of a rabbit hole to go down because you're challenging them with access to data. It gets very complicated very quickly, and they might not be ready for all that yet. So what we've developed is a calculator that gives an industry level benchmark with just 4 inputs. We ask them what their annual revenue is, their country of main operations, their market sector, and their market subsector. That's it. So stuff they know off the top of their head pretty much. From that, we generate a high-level, industry-level benchmark of what their scope 1, 2, and 3 footprint would be, and therefore their total footprint. We also then give them a list of immediate reductions they could probably make. Now, clearly, we don't know what's making their scope 1, scope 2, and it's only a high-level estimate at this stage. But the fact of the matter is, in the majority of scope categories, you don't need to know the number to make a reduction. So don't chase the utopia of accuracy. Start doing some useful stuff that makes a difference. And most businesses, if you're talking to people at the right level, get that because that's what they're trying to do in the way that they run their business anyway, which is, show me the stuff that creates value. And so if you can do that, create the easy on-ramp, but then help them do things, you can then educate them more and more as their appetite and understanding increases.
And it makes a lot of sense to me because you don't want to go overwhelming people right off the bat with so much information and so many things to do that they have no idea what to do. And the paralysis analysis comes in.
Yeah, and I learned this. It's not my first rodeo with a startup. I had a business a few years ago, which is still going, and my co-founder is running it. But it was about personal development, so nothing to do with sustainability. But we used to sit in front of companies because we had defined the optimum framework for doing it. And it was really complicated. And you just saw everybody's eyes glaze over with the complexity of everything. Where, where actually all they wanted was some really quick and easy, press a couple of buttons and give me a tiny bit, and then I'll think about what I do next. And so I suppose that experience for me really influenced how we build Switch2Zero.
Are there any growth strategies or initiatives or anything you tried last year that really didn't work out quite well? I know you already mentioned that you turned off advertising halfway through the year. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, that's by far the biggest. We were spending north of 15K a month on paid advertising. So it was relatively significant for a small company, and I deeply regret that spend. So I would definitely counsel against that. The other area that didn't go as well, where I had more expertise and therefore I suppose a higher natural level of confidence when we went in, was using a third party to do some outbound email campaigns. Now it could have been them. But in fairness, we talked to 5 different companies. They were all doing nuances of roughly the same thing, and they all claimed to be experts sending hundreds of thousands of emails out en masse, blah, blah, blah. My logic was, well, there's a learning curve here. We could jump ahead of it by using a third party, and it's much cheaper than me paying one person to sit there and do it. The reality is they just don't care enough about your business. So you're constantly battling tone of voice because they'll be saying, say this because it will give us a click. And you're saying, well, that's not accurate, or that's not the right way to describe what we're trying to do. It's not authentic, if you see what I mean. I think that's vital if you're trying to build a business, that authenticity. And the second is, unless they have skin in the game, which most of them won't go anywhere near, they're kind of turning the wheel. So for me, I wasn't getting the insight to execution learning cycle you would expect in that sort of thing. The level of variant testing, the layer of recommendations of do this, do that, and everything else. So it's not that it didn't work. It's just, for me, I wish I had started it first internally and took that initial hump, because it wouldn't have been that big. And then what you're actually building is more intellectual capacity in your business rather than shortening the learning cycle as I perceived it the first time round.
Yeah, you're not the first person I've spoken to talk about agencies not delivering like that. I think there's a few main issues when it comes to working with agencies. I think, as you said, testing and learning and iterating tends not to happen quickly enough. I think it comes to strategy as well. Often what will happen is an agency will be really good at the work that they do, but they tend not to get involved in the strategy side of things. And because of that, they lose that tone of voice, they lose that brand feel, and like you said, the authenticity. And it's a real shame, because some of them do really good work, but because they don't go deep enough into it, because they need to stay profitable, they just don't deliver as well as they could do.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think you make a good point, and it understand like I was bashing third parties, if you know what I mean, in terms of value contribution. But for me, it was as much our fault as it was theirs, if not more. So, the level of investment we put in on helping them understand us and what we were about and everything else, with the benefit of hindsight, wasn't enough. And I think, going back to your point around how that then influences tone of voice and other things, I'd then I'd see the end result and become frustrated and think I could fix it with a half-hour call. Whereas realistically, it's not going to happen. And so I think from that point of view, if you're zoning in on a third party that is expert at exactly what you want, and you know what you want, then I could see the outcome being different. But it certainly put me off for the time being, put it that way.
And I think it's an interesting area to explore. You have the tool and you have the consultancy. So it's almost the sort of do it yourself and the done with you model. And a lot of agencies tend to go with the done for you model before they're actually ready to, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, ultimately, I wanted to build a digital business that was scalable globally. So consulting for us is going to get overlaid by AI capability and a much higher degree of automation than you would normally see, because I think this is a space eminently capable of moving in that direction. But you have to have the raw data and understanding to train the models in the right way. So there is going to be a bit of a time lag to that. But aside from that, I do think that if you're trying to build a holistic solution, you don't want to build everything. You've got to start with the baby bricks and the foundation and then move forward as you learn. And I think one of the things that I learned actually watching Andy Jassy, he used to, when he was heading AWS, do an annual speech about AWS and what's important. And there was one thing that always resonated with me that he said, which is speed beats quality. Initially, I thought, really, does it really? And clearly that's a very simplistic phrase and it's a catchy one, but your ability to do things fast, get them out the door and learn, rather than building perfection, that skill is an essential ingredient, I think, for growing a business pointing towards your customers rather than a business as you see the world from the inside. I think that's the most important thing. Interestingly, even though I say that, the biggest challenge I get from my team is scope creep. That's what's pointed at me. Because they'll say, well, we're thinking, and I'll be going, yeah, this is awesome. We could do this. Hold on a minute. So, I need to practice what I preach a bit more. But for me, that's so important. How fast can you get things out the door? It doesn't matter if they're not awesome. I know that might sound counterintuitive, and obviously it's how you position what you do. But your ability to then iterate and refine that at a phenomenal pace means you'll get a much better product quicker out of the market.
Yeah, you can ideate and think things through as much as you want, but there is no substitute for actually trying things yourself, seeing what works in the market and what doesn't, and then working from there. And to be fair, it's probably some advice I could listen to a little bit more as well.
It's easy though, isn't it? When you're passionate about your business and you have clarity of what needs to be done, the consequence of that is often scope creep and perfection. Neither of those things help your customers.
Yeah, I think especially when it's a small business and you're one of the few team members there, and you really care about the quality at that point, because it's almost staked to your name. Because when it's a small business, the business feels like it's a manifestation of you, and there's all that psychological stuff that comes with it.
And also the chances of you being right are very, very low.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're thinking about your product and your proposition, you'll have lots of great ideas and you'll envisage a future where everyone loves it. The reality is they'll use it in a way you didn't expect. You'll be missing a specific pain point that you hadn't considered. There's so many things you'll start to learn. So building the smallest possible thing that will actually test what you're trying to test, couldn't emphasize enough.
What is one piece of advice you'd give to another sustainability business leader starting their business or growing their business?
There's probably actually two.
I'll give you two, it's fine.
So the first is you've got to build with authenticity. So if you're building a business to make money, candidly, clearly that's a great thing to happen. But if you're not passionate about what you're trying to do, it bleeds through to your business, the quality of your product, how you think about the future, what you're trying to do. And so my first piece of advice is, what's your motivation for doing this? And are you trying to genuinely change the game and you're passionate about doing that? Or are you trying to make money and this is a great business idea? I'm not saying the latter can't work. I'm sure there's loads of examples where it has. But to be authentic, you've got to be passionate about the mission you're on. So that's by far the biggest one for me. But then from a more practical, sort of tangible perspective, there's two that I think the golden rules I try and follow. One is speed beats perfection, which we've already talked about. The second is be ruthless with your burn rate. And if you're spending money, you have to be really, really confident and comfortable that it's going to be worth it. There's no point, particularly if you have investors and you're suddenly flush because you've done through a funding round and you've got a fair bit of cash. It's not about getting smoothies flown in from South American country because that's going to make your staff feel great. The most dangerous time, I think, is when you start to get funding and you're getting pressure from investors to scale and grow. And the easiest way you think to do that is to spend money on lots of things that you think you should have. And that's the other thing, that focus on burn rate. And I've learned the hard way doing that a number of times. Because as much as you think you're managing your burn rate hard, you're not. So, that's the other bit I would probably say.
Ian, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Is there anything you want to leave our viewers on?
Well, the one thing I would is just do it. If you want to set up a business in sustainability, the more talent, the more passion, the more ideas in this space, the better for us and future generations. So the one thing above all, do it. It's difficult, it's challenging, it's enormously rewarding, but you can make a massive difference to the planet. And I can't think of a bigger thing to be doing at all.
Ian, thank you.
No worries.